Junior Senator from North Dakota.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to take some time to share some of my thoughts on this Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act that we're debating today. And I wasn't intending to speak specifically to the amendment that Senator Cornyn just brought up, but I just can't resist saying, man, I wish you well. I think when a bipartisan solution like Senator Cornyn and Senator Padilla have come up with to provide flexibilities to our governors and our communities, it just makes all the sense in the world. So I'm looking forward to voting yes, and I hope we can get a resolution that allows at least 59 of my closest friends to do the same. I want to start out by thanking Senators Portman and Sinema for providing such incredible leadership, and to the group of bipartisan senators that negotiated and coordinated this incredible effort. I also want to thank Senator Capito, who's managing, of course, this floor process, along with Environment and Public Works Committee Chairman Tom Carper. The progress that they have made on this issue with the administration earlier this year, paired with the excellent leadership that they provided the committee, really exemplifies what's possible when we work together, and has allowed us to get to this point. Madam President, reviving America's roads and bridges is a long-standing national priority of Congress, and is one that's taken us too long to address. We need reliable, accessible infrastructure to operate locally and to compete globally. And as it currently stands, the bill before us is well positioned to meet that exact need. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act isn't perfect. No bill ever is. But it makes historic investments in assets that will benefit every American for many, many years. I applaud the group for using the Surface Transportation Bill that we unanimously passed out of the Environment and Public Works Committee as the foundation for this bill. As the lead Republican on the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee, I know how much time and effort both sides of the aisle have put in to surface transportation reauthorization. The end result reflected the good work we accomplished, and it was the perfect building block for the package that is before us. As you know, Madam President, I was not an original part of this bipartisan negotiating group. However, when I was approached for my input, I'd made my top priorities clear. One, keeping the permitting reforms in our bill, permitting reforms like the one agency decision that was a rule that President Trump put into place, that President Biden removed this first day in office. It's codified in this bill for surface transportation. Prioritizing dedicated funding to states and to their departments of transportation as part of the traditional formula for distribution, and limiting the expansion of urban transit programs, and including the bipartisan bill that Senator Lujan and I introduced to clean up orphaned and abandoned oil and gas wells. I was glad to see these provisions, as well as our committee's Drinking and Wastewater Infrastructure Act, in the bill. I also appreciate the use of unspent COVID-19 relief funds to help pay for these priorities. Rather than being used for paying people to not work and adding fuel to the fires of inflation, this does just the opposite. I thank my colleagues for asking for my opinion, and I'm even more grateful that they listened and included these provisions in our final product. Infrastructure has been a priority for Congress because it's a priority for our constituents. America cannot succeed without a robust infrastructure from one coast to the other, in all the places like North Dakota in between. We need roads and bridges to go from farm to town, and from town to city to city, and state to state. We use ports and waterways and railroads to move the products that we produce to places they could otherwise never get to. We use rail and air to connect with family and friends and other business associates around the world. And we use broadband connectivity to facilitate transactions, both personal and business. Infrastructure is foundational to our way of life, and it's the constitutional responsibility of the federal government to facilitate interstate commerce, including the movements of goods and services along our highways and byways and waterways and railways. Rural states like North Dakota know this better than most. In fact, Rugby, North Dakota is literally the geographical center of the North American continent. We are landlocked, and we rely on our transportation infrastructure to get where we need to go, and more importantly, to move the products that we produce to where they need to get. For example, North Dakota is the top producer of durum wheat, which gets ground into semolina flour, which becomes the main ingredient in pasta. The wheat goes from the field to a grain elevator by a farm road, to a mill by rail, and to a processing plant by both. And then it goes anywhere from a grocery store in California to a restaurant in New York, or perhaps overseas to a market far away. And just like every other commodity we produce, it requires a reliable infrastructure system that is safe and sufficient for every single mile on the journey. The United States needs rural America, and rural America needs infrastructure. The personal needs it fulfills and the economic benefits it delivers are obvious. Rather than investing trillions of taxpayer dollars on government handouts to people to not work, we can spend money on putting people to work, revitalizing a system that directly benefits all of us. And that's what the plan before us would help accomplish. It's not perfect, no bill is, as I said. And there are parts of it that I don't support. But there are parts I know that some of my colleagues do not support, even though they're top priorities for me. Our founding fathers intended for Congress to collaborate and find common ground. Those are functions of our system. They're not a side effect. It is easy to imagine if every founder had demanded to get everything they wanted and nothing else, well, then we would have had a king. And we may not have had the system of cooperative federalism that we do today. And if enough of them believed that doing nothing is better than getting 80 or 90% of what they wanted, then our more perfect union would never have gotten started and had a chance to become that. The inability to meet in the middle is not an excuse for inaction, especially when it comes to addressing not just the pressing needs of the American people here at home, but also protecting our standing as a country on the world stage. We understand how important infrastructure is, but so does China, so does Russia, so do all of our adversaries who would like to see us continue to fall behind. The Chinese Communist Party would love to see America's roads and bridges crumble. They would be happy to let infrastructure get in the way of American production and allow for them to meet the needs of the global economy in our absence. The bill that we have before us gives us an opportunity to help stop that from happening, Madam President. Now, while I'm all for working across the aisle, that doesn't mean I'll support bills that I fundamentally disagree with, like the $3.5 trillion plus spending bill that Senate Democrats plan to cobble together after we finish this bipartisan infrastructure bill. I oppose the Democrats' reckless tax and spend agenda, and I will join each of my Republican colleagues in opposing it and offering amendments to change its harmful outcomes. That bill is completely separate from the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we're talking about today. They're not tied together despite what rhetoric there may be otherwise. Both should be considered on their own merits separately. What a shame it would be for Democrats to offer the American public a glimpse of bipartisanship and cooperation to only do an about-face and hold it hostage while they jam through a massive tax increase and growth of the federal government, adding to inflation. I hope my colleagues will choose to build on this bipartisan success and resist the urge to follow the partisan whims of their political base. As it stands, Madam President, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act would be a significant win for our country. I know it would be for my state. So far, we have avoided adding poison pills or derailing the process, and I urge my colleagues to keep it that way. North Dakota needs safe and sufficient infrastructure. America needs safe and sufficient infrastructure. And the world needs the United States to have safe and sufficient infrastructure. I urge my colleagues to keep the negative parts of the bill in perspective and to appreciate the opportunity we have today to make a difference for our constituents. I yield the floor.